Hi everyone, this is Andrew Primer, Ukrainian American, reporting from Kiev. In today's podcast, this is week 126 of Russian invasion of Ukraine, and this is the first week of August 2024. So, in today's podcast, we're gonna talk about last week Ukraine confirmed arrival of the F-16 fighter jets, and we're going to talk about will negotiations take place soon and who will play the main role in it. After almost a year of negotiations, Ukraine has received its first 10 516 fighter jets. The first small batch of fighter jets from NATO allies has arrived in Ukraine in a long awaited move that might boost the war torn nation's ability to repel Russian attacks. Let's talk about what only 10 F 16 fighter jets delivered to Ukraine can do. This makes it possible to test these aircraft in combat conditions and draw the following conclusions. Do they meet modern requirements? Are they capable of conducting air battles on parity terms, for example, with Russian fighter jets, Su 27, Su 29, and Su 35? In general, Air Force of Ukraine has three main tasks. The first is the country's air defense. Without it, the Russians will simply destroy everything with ordinary bombs. The second issue is supporting the ground forces by destroying the carriers of the cab bombs. So now the Russians are pushing through our defenses. They are not breaking through, they are pushing through it. They destroy the strongholds with dropping cubs after that, a meat assault, and if it failed, another cab strikes. That is, the urgent issue is the destruction of cab carriers or bombers. So the cab carriers can only be destroyed by aerial combat. Anti aircraft missile complexes here, let's say, are not very mobile, will not help much, and are risky. Still, we hope we got the F 16 with the latest model missiles with the longest range, and the planes will be able to destroy both the Russian attack aircraft and the carriers of the Cubs, and I hope conduct air battles with the Russian Su 35 fighters on parity terms, which until now could destroy our planes without even entering the zone of destruction of our fighters. For example, the big challenge for Ukraine right now is to protect the newly arrived F 16. According to the speech of the Air Force commander of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, General Golubtsov, he said that in general, F 16s will participate in combat operations exclusively from Ukrainian airfields by the preservation of spare aircraft, which will come from the Allies, will be abroad, not in Ukraine. That's why, due to difficulty maintaining the Western jets, one of our planes flew to Poland or Romania for repairs or maintenance. Because it cannot be repaired in our country yet. The preservation of aircraft on the territory of Ukraine will be the priority. One base airfield will be covered, maybe even the Patriot air defense systems protected, and other air defenses means as well. Also, several operational airfields where planes will land temporarily. For example, weapons were suspended. He flew to an operational airfield. Russian planes appeared. He took off, completed a combat mission, and returned either to the base airfield or to one of the operational airfield. That is, there will also be preservation by dispersing these planes, 2 to 4 aircraft on one airfield, except for the base one. Of course, operational airfields will not be heavily covered. I understand that only some Ukrainian airfields are suitable for storing F 16. With our weapons, which are just air to air missiles, any airfield is half the weight. If it's fully loaded, there are 6.5 tons of weapons on it. Then only a few of our airfields can receive them because we have a tiled surface. And Western F 16 jets usually operate from asphalt smoothly runways. I will explain again to you guys, far from all aviation experts, what these 10 planes will be enough for. In the first stage, we must conduct combat tests of this aircraft. Now, effective how effective will they be in the battles with Russian fighter jets? If they are effective, it will be necessary to increase the number of jets in Ukraine. If they are ineffective, allies should be asked to put other systems on the planes. For example, an improved onboard defense system that deflects missiles, more long range missiles if we still need that last type of missiles. If the planes turn out to be ineffective, then there is no point in increasing their number. Do you remember what happened with Western tanks? Some of the tanks were very effective on the battlefield, and other tanks, I'm not gonna call like the Leopard 2 tanks, that were too heavy uh, for our ground, and sometimes they couldn't move in certain areas because the surface was too soft. The same situation with the fighter jets. Of course, there are doubts that these aircraft may need to be more effective in countering Russian aircraft. But let's not forget one fact, that the F 16 planes are quite old, although modernized. Were opposed by Russian planes whose serial production actually started in 2008 and 2012 and was modernized in 2020s. So, Ukraine armed forces need to find out what the results of air battles will be and how effectively they are. Russian planes have a very modern onboard defense systems. Missiles with a range of 300 kilometers are optionally installed on them. And if we received the longest range American missiles, that then there are only 180 kilometers, which is twice less the distance. And the Russians have a radar range, let's say approximately 350 kilometers on transport planes and 200 kilometers on fighter jets. They can see a typical fighter 200 kilometers away. But F 16 radar sees Russian planes only at the distance of 120 kilometers away. That is, it will be necessary to develop effective tactical techniques to level the advantage of the Russians. For example, it is used to fly at low altitudes where neither anti aircraft nor missile systems can reach, and where the range of Russian missiles is halved. Against close to the ground, they cannot detect targets effectively, and all the time to modernize these tactical techniques because the Russians will not look after the rear and will not wait until they are defeated. That is, increasing the number of F 16s is a controversial issue. It is correct that we received a small number of them at first, in the first stage. One squadron will be enough as an experimental unit. We have spent the whole year negotiating with our Western allies to receive those jets, and the Russians knew we would receive them at some point. So they're working hard to increase the weapon production and deliveries to the front lines. So the arrival of first 10 F-16 fighter jets in Ukraine has generated considerable excitement. It seems everyone truly believes it will change the dynamics of the war. The delivery of Western fighter jets is important, as is the number of them deployed at the front line. We had the same excitement over Western tanks 1 year ago. You might remember that. And this excitement faded away 2 months later. Have you noticed that nobody speaks about them anymore? And there are no success stories, videos of their combat effectiveness or breakthrough military campaigns, as we see with drones and long range missiles. Why is that so? When we needed them the most, I'm talking about the tanks, we asked for at least 300 tanks. We didn't receive them, and they started arriving gradually, 10, 15 units at a time, and not in the promised quantity, allowing the Russians to destroy them as they trekked onto the battlefield. Now, the story might play out again with the recently delivered F-16 jets. What is it the enemy is doing at the same time? First, despite all the aid we have recently received, the Russians continue to take over the new Ukrainian settlements every other day. This year, we're speaking about the first 7 months, the number of lost territories has doubled compared to the full 12 months of 2023. This is why Putin doesn't want to negotiate. The Russians keep progressing. Currently, Ukraine has reached a dead end, but Russia continues to move forward. Unfortunately, this is not all. We have one more piece of bad news. While we're celebrating the arrival of F 16 jets, the enemy has achieved another goal, which few want to talk about. The Russians have put a new railway line into the operation that connects the Russian city of Rostov with occupied Mariupol. This means the enemy has significantly improved its frontline logistics, which can worsen our position and lead to the loss of more settlements. It means will be no peace negotiations with Russia until we make Putin bleed badly, and he has no choice but sit down at the negotiation table. So now, still, we hear a lot about the Second Peace Summit and proposed by President Zelensky, and with acceptance of Russian Federation to attend it. Finnish President Alexander Stubb said, "It's time to start peace talks between Ukraine and Russia." Personally, I don't think this is the best time for Ukraine to start negotiations with the aggressor. It will come only when our armed forces will do what they did in 2022, when they quickly kicked out Russians from the Kiev region and the Kharkiv region within several months. Today, we will be in a good position to negotiate when Crimea is cleansed of the Russian war criminals, when it becomes impossible for them to live normally because there will be nowhere to transport weapons, food, equipment, and other means. When we see that in the air, Ukraine begins to dominate gradually but relentlessly. So that might be the chance. And in order to achieve that goal, Ukraine must destroy the carriage bridge that the Putin proud of. Only then will be possible to think about the beginning of the negotiations. When Putin realizes that if he continues in the same manner, the same spirit, it means that not only in the border areas will everything start burning and exploding, but it will fly further. Some actually recently developed Ukrainian drones flew all the way to Olenia airfield, which is 1,800 kilometers from Ukrainian border. So it means our drones can fly anywhere they want, unnoticed, and destroy any target they see. And the fact that we are now trying to reduce some pressure with all these conversations that can only be considered a diplomatic step, I can believe this is and agree with that. But as a practical result, it is also zero. In a comment to the French media, President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky said that only China can somehow change the situation if it takes a different position, not a mediating one, but put pressure on Russia and as the West and the United States pressure the aggressor as well. After that, we heard the answer from China that the Chinese Brazilian plan is very good, and it seems that more than 110 countries already support it. What does it mean? This means that we do not understand what position China is taking. Well, but what miracle will China put pressure on Russia? The president of China, Xi, uh, we have to try to see the world from the president of China's eyes. China feels actually great in this particular situation when Russia, first, depends on it, second, it supplies there what it needs and earns from it, and he needs this half alive, half dead Putin regime so that the Moscow Beijing axis of evil still exists. Well, so why China should change this terrible situation for itself? Yes, there might be one condition when he is told in the West that China, if China continues to help Russia, then we will break your foreign trade, and then you will get into a car that will not go anywhere, and China will struggle significantly. You will do what Putin is doing now. Look for a way out where it will no longer exist. Because China is not Russia. China is way more. Without access to foreign markets, the collapse would occur even faster than under Putin. This is the only way to get anything from China. And when we hear from our Western partners that China can influence Russia, it is nothing. This is about one's own importance, signing one's own incompetence. Political scientists say a meeting between leaders of China and Ukraine is being prepared for September October. Maybe Vladimir Zelensky will fly to China, and I'm expecting something from this meeting as well. If you read Sino-Brazilian peace plan, there is nothing sensible in this regard. These are, again, calls for all good against all bad. That's not how it works, and it usually doesn't happen. Therefore, if Chinese president pushes this plan, the so-called Sino-Brazilian plan, it is once again hitting his head against the wall. We cannot accept the plan to freeze the conflict. And according to this plan, we must stop the war where our troops are today. So you understand, this is a huge gift to Putin, and this is what he's trying to achieve. He needs a break. And as you remember, over the last two decades, when Putin takes a break, he he makes more weapons and start the war again. The situation is unlikely to improve by the time a new president in the White House in January 2025. China is politically une- unequivocal on Russian side, while Iran and North Korea offer important military supply lines. So the key issue in the effort to end the war against Ukraine is not so much the need for a negotiated solution, but how to deal with the red lines of each side, Russia and Ukraine. And here, according to the current public opinion in Ukraine, territorial concessions are less problematic than the issue of NATO membership. More than half of the surveyed Ukrainians reject any agreement that involves territorial compromises and requires the country to renounce NATO membership. However, 47 to 50, 47 to 57% of Ukrainians are ready to agree to various degrees of territorial concessions from Russia if Ukraine can join the transatlantic alliance and receive security guarantees. If such a compromise were reached between Kiev and Moscow, it would most likely result from pressure from Washington and Beijing. So the main question might be under what conditions the US and China will see such a compromise, and therefore peace in Ukraine as beneficial to their own long term strategic interests. Thank you for listening. If you like my podcast, please share with your friends.